Hi, guys. This is Courtney Thornton, and I'm going to discuss with you the article for this week, which is Teacher Teams and Distributed Leadership, a study of group discourse and collaboration. Now, this article is located in the Educational Administration Quarterly, Volume 43, Number 1, February 2007, pages 67 through 100. And this article is written by J. Pardes Scribner, R. Keith Sawyer, Sheldon Watson, Vicki L. Myers. So we're going to discuss this article, and the key words that we are really going to focus on are distributed leadership, teacher teams, school improvement, and discourse analysis. So let's discuss this article. The purpose of this article was that the authors are trying to determine how two collaborative professional leadership teams, which would be the instructional professional leadership team and the building professional leadership team, they wanted to know how they contributed to the leadership in a large, comprehensive public high school in mid-sized Missouri community. So throughout this research, the convenient sampling was used when it came to reference of the PLT, and that was mainly because the administration and the faculty's willingness to participate, the school's long history of teacher teams, a recent emphasis and explicit focus on professional learning community, and the school's relatively close proximity to the researchers. Now, random sampling was used when it came down to the data. They recorded all of the sessions, but they just picked out certain tapes to just use. They just randomly picked them. And so they wanted to kind of spot check to see, compare the information from the two teams. All right, so let's discuss the school demographics. This particular high school that was being researched was comprised of approximately 1,650 students, and it is located in a small district of 16,000 students. The racial composition of the school demographics is that it's 83% white, 9% African American, 3% Hispanic, 3% Asian, and less than 1% Native American. Unfortunately, the teacher racial composition was not available at the time. Now, the researchers charged both teams with this responsibility. They were to improve their leadership through collaboration. Now, let's discuss the building PLTs. They were to address the non-instructional functions of the school. They were to develop, review, and offer suggestions for the change in the school policies and practices for ensuring the academic success of students that were in danger of failing more than one subject. Now, the instructional PLTs, they are a central component of the middle school paradigm. So they're also a component of the high school. They were organized by their discipline, and they were to focus on how to teach cross-curricular subjects. They were to create a plan to help identify and solve predefined problems, and sometimes find and solve interdeterminate problems, develop goals, curricula, instructional strategies, budgets, and staff development programs, and so that student achievement could improve. Now, the building PLT was consisted of 7 members. Now, these were members that were they included the coordinator of the student support program, the gifted education coordinator. There were 2 2 social studies teachers that were not part of the instructional PLT, the director of special education, the director of guidance, an outreach counselor. And each one of these teachers had 25 or more years of experience in public education. Now, the social worker only had 13 years working in the school context, but it was unknown how many years of professional service that this person had prior to this. All the teachers in this group were white. There were 6 females and 1 male. Now let's look at the makeup of the instructional PLT. This team consists of 3 social studies teachers, 3 English teachers, the respective department chairs, 2 advanced placement teachers, and sometimes a school guidance counselor periodically joined the group. Now, the members in this group were also created the same way that the building PLT members were. They were also all white, 6 females, and 1 male. Now, these teachers ranged from having 2 to 10 years of experience, and their focus was for teachers to cross teach the American history and American literature. Now, the building PLT's data that came from 10 meetings that occurred during the semester. The meetings were digitally they were recorded on video, and the meetings averaged approximately 35 minutes in length. The instructional PLT data collection came from the same semester, but they had 8 meetings during the semester. The meetings were on digital video as well as audio tape. The meetings averaged approximately 43 minutes in length, and some of the meetings occurred after school. Most of them occurred after school. 2 meetings occurred on early release days, which lasted a little longer, approximately about an hour. Now, during this research, the researchers utilized the distributed leadership perspective, which is a conceptual and analytical approach to understanding how the work of leadership takes place among the people in the context of a complex organization. Now, I can attest to saying that a school can be considered a complex organization with several moving parts. Now, the distributed leadership perspective is relatively new, and it has began to influence empirical studies of school leadership. In this article, distributed leadership is a perspective that helps us to understand how the two teacher teams are embedded in an interactive network of interdependent school activities that collectively constitute leadership. Past research has shown that it only focused on elementary schools, but this new approach wanted to show how teachers communicated and worked with each other for the betterment of a school environment in the secondary educational setting. Now, they had 3 guiding questions that they used to guide their research. The first question is, what factors contribute to or interfere with team decision making? What discourse patterns are associated with leadership within teacher work teams? What organizational conditions foster or impede leadership within teacher work teams? Now, the researchers determined that both situational and social aspects of distributed leadership were the foci of the investigation. So it's basically saying that the inside as well as the outside factors contributed to the outcome. Now let's look at these methods of study. This qualitative study used constant comparative analysis and discourse analysis to explore leadership as a distributed phenomenon. Data from field notes and video recordings of the 2 teacher teams were part of the investigation. They were used. So just to give a clarification of what a comparative analysis and discourse analysis is, a comparative analysis is an item by item comparison of 2 or more comparable alternatives, processes, products, qualifications, sets of data, systems, or the like. And discourse analysis is a general term for a number of approaches to analyze written, vocal, or sign language use or any meaning-making event. Basically, the discourse analysis is that you're trying to make sense of what you are researching. So now let's go ahead and look at the findings. The researchers learned 3 important things from the professional collaborative interaction within each team. They learned purpose, autonomy, and patterns of discourse. Purpose and autonomy was strengthened when there was a clear support from the group. The researchers argued that the nature of the purpose and autonomy within the teacher team can influence the social distribution of the leadership. Now, let's go on to where we're trying to answer the question, how well did this group of individuals work together? How did these, in this professional setting, determine how they solve problems, or how did they become creative leaders? Now, the implications to this was that although it is not explicitly stated, the conclusions that can be drawn from this research included conceptualizing leadership in terms of interaction, needing to help teachers become aware of controversial dynamics that lead to or subvert effective collaboration, and needing to help principals become more aware of their role in helping to establish clarity and purpose and appropriate levels of autonomy so that teams may engage in work that leads to effective and innovative problem solving and problem finding activities. Now, throughout this, the researchers identified 2 distinct patterns of discourse. It was passive discourse and active discourse. It was discovered that these two discourse patterns were related to the organizational context and the leadership effectiveness of the teams. In essence, the stronger the leader, the stronger the team. It was also determined that leadership was not just a formal role. It did not have a specific title. In this model, the understanding of leadership is enhanced by examining the behavior and interaction of teachers, administrators, parents, and other stakeholders. Leadership was embedded in the relationships between the roles. So now it went on and talked about interdependencies. What is dependent upon something else? We talked about that. Well, it talked about that in the book, The Variables. So let's see what the article says about this. It talked about pooled interdependencies. That means each organizational department or business unit performs completely separate functions. Talked about sequential um, interdependencies, dependence or subunits or subdivisions on information, materials, products, or resources generated by those preceding them in process. And it also talked about reciprocal interdependencies, a cyclical situation where the output of one organizational division is regularly used as the input of another organizational division. Now, these teams demonstrated that the decisions were not made by a single individual. They were decided on through collaborative dialogues between many individuals that were engaged in mutually dependent activities. The researchers did say that one drawback of the implication of the collaborative structures, such as teaming, is the potential for the cultivation of groupthink and unduly convergent thinking, which means that sometimes no new innovative ideas will be created because everyone thinks alike. However, the outcomes of the socially distributed leadership cannot be predicted in advance. Therefore, collaboration is a must so that effective problem solving can be done. Now let's look at these methods of data analysis. Random sampling was used for the data. I stated that earlier. The tapes were randomly pulled and transcribed for the researchers so that they may conduct analysis for both teams. Now, what the research wanted to know if there were any type of disagreements between the team members and the type of leadership that was exerted on the issues that came about. It was proven that both inside and outside influences caused much communications among the teams. Now, with this, there were also categories that were then found. Researchers found that the PLT purposes for the two case study teams fell into two distinct categories. It was known problem solving and discovered problem finding. Now, in the problem solving, that involves approaching a problem that everyone knows about and applying well-known procedures and techniques to resolve the problem. Basically, it's saying, we know that this keeps happening, but what are we going to do to fix it? So problem solving has a closed purpose. Now, problem finding, on the other hand, is required when no one is quite sure how to frame the problem or what procedures would be involved in the solution. So it's basically saying, why does this keep happening? The instructional PLTs had a problem-solving purpose. The instructional PLT's purpose was to create a cross-curricular instructional assessment materials for team-taught social studies and English classes. They know what the problem is, but they do not have a solution. But guess what? They are working together so they can find a solution. Now, in contrast, the building PLT has a problem finding purpose. They are to determine why certain students are persistently failing or in danger of failing multiple classes and to make recommendations for changes to be made school-wide on the intervention plan so that these students can go ahead and pass. Now, we all know, being in the field of education, that no one solution is a one-size-fits-all. The problems that a lot of these students face may not even be school related. They probably are outside related, but they play a major part in their education. Now, three constructs were emerged from this understanding of collaborative interaction, and that was purpose, autonomy, and pattern of discourse. Purpose and autonomy were identified as organizational conditions. Why we teach and how we teach is based upon where we teach. Discourse is when each team member have their own reasons for their individual problems, and their communication reveals why there were those issues. So when we talk about autonomy and collaboration, with these groups, they both dealt with constraints. However, the usage of the appropriate constraints were what they were trying to find a solution for. So that remained their focus, that remained their closed purpose. So let's look at the instructional PLT. The instructional PLT occasionally made reference to the organizational constraints. Now, their organizational constraints included the department chairs, particular students, technological concerns, or scheduling issues. But yet they remained focused on their target. What can we do to integrate social studies and history? I'm sorry, social studies and language arts. Now, the building PLT received inadequate information, and each new piece of information led to more questions. So unfortunately, they weren't able to come up with a good solution, because every time they were looking for something, they got something else. So it was just not a real good study for them. They identified problems, then they re-identified problems again. Basically, they looked at the problem, looked at it again, but didn't have any solutions. Now, as we go on comparing these two groups, it revealed that the building PLT engaged in patterns of passive discourse, whereas the instructional PLT engaged in active discourse. The findings are consistent with other research suggestions and organizational influences, conditions influence team performance. Now, when we go on and we're looking at more autonomy and collaboration, the group's understanding of its purpose, which was instructional improvement, and autonomy, its independence from instructional PLTs, facilitated its ability to pose problems and issues and develop solutions. A critical perspective on collaboration suggests that teamwork can function to limit divergent thinking. Divergent thinking is, of course, a hallmark of creativity and innovation. So, in conclusion, the findings were that the groups demonstrated serious commitments to the pursuit of creative solutions for the issues that took priority in the school. Unfortunately, organizational conditions limited them to finding the solutions. The obstacles of the building PLT were not placed there intentionally. It was pretty evident that they were manifestations of the long-standing cultural patterns on the way that the school typically operated. However, both teams provided examples of how distributed leadership is a complex phenomenon and can just as easily be associated with the negative qualities of an organization as it can be associated with the positive qualities of an organization. Collaboration does not necessarily equate with workers becoming more creative and innovative. In fact, the opposite can occur if the right leader is not in place. Researchers have found that there is a thin line between organizational support and the surveillance that it goes with it. Clarifying this distinction with a critical eye should be one area of future research. Leadership is a complex social phenomenon manifested in many ways. The leadership of a team influences the group's thoughts and decisions when searching for solutions. Now, lastly, I do want to say this, that the process of interaction are key means of understanding the relationship between the forms of leadership. The study of interaction represents a new frontier in our understanding of what leadership is, how it develops, and how we can foster it. I hope you all enjoyed my presentation. I want each of you to have a good evening, and I will see you all at the next one. Bye-bye.